What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. I'm joined by your favorite beat reporter, Chris Fedor. Chris, you've had not even 24 hours with the fam. How has it been, my guy? How has it been back in the city?
Well, I'm just trying to get adjusted to this time zone once again. It was a long flight from Vegas. It was a long travel day yesterday, and it was a good thing that my son napped this afternoon because I was just chilling on the couch. I was planning on doing a few things around the house, and I just passed out on the couch in the most uncomfortable position. But I was just so exhausted, so I needed today to kind of recover from that. I think I'll be a little bit more comfortable tomorrow and back in line with what I was before I left for Vegas, but I definitely needed a recovery day. But other than that, it was good to spend the night with the family and spend the morning with the family. And I was able to take my son. I was able to get back in time last night to take my son to his school this morning, which was really, really good. So that was my goal all along. That's why I took the flight that I did yesterday. And even though it was delayed multiple hours, I was able to do that, take him, drop him off at school. And then I got a much needed massage, my monthly massage, which was very much needed after all the travel and sleeping in a different bed and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a good day, other than being completely wiped out.
Self-care day. We love to see it. We love to see it, man. You know how big we are on self-care, on mental health, and all of those things on this podcast. I'm very happy to hear all of those things. But Chris, we got a little pushback from some of our listeners about us having a little bit of fun about the Vegas food tour on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to save the fun stuff that I have for later on in the podcast. We'll get to that a little bit later. But let's start off with some news because I feel like this is the better coordination that the fans like to listen. If they want to stay and hear the fun stuff later, I'm going to give you that tease now. But, okay, you're going to have to wait around and listen for it, okay? But, Chris, obviously we talked about some of the conversations you had while you were in Vegas. Jalen Tyson, Darius Garland, those big headliners. And the other people that you got to talk to, Evan Mobley is a big factor for that. He has not signed the extension that we believe to have been extended to him at this point. But what do you feel is like this vibe for his situation? What are you hearing from Evan Mobley's kind of crew and people that you know that are close to him and things of that nature when it comes to his situation?
Yeah, the sense that I get, Ethan, is just it's a matter of when it's going to get done. And some of these things can be complicated because of some of the stuff that you want to put into the contract. Is there going to be some kind of financial raise? What's the percentage of that? Trade kicker, if you want to put that stuff in there. There are just different kinds of things that go into this kind of contract for Evan. And this is going to be the biggest contract that he is going to sign to this point. The financial parameters of it and what it's going to go to and the length of it, that's not all that complicated, but it's all the jargon that has to be mixed in there that the Cavs have to agree to, Evan has to agree to. Obviously, Cade Cunningham, he agreed to one, Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner. So I totally understand why people are saying, what the heck is going on? But as we've talked about on this podcast a number of times, Evan's belief in this organization, Evan's desire to be with this organization, that has not changed since he was drafted third overall in 2021. And the Cavs' view of Evan and his importance and the kind of financial commitment that they're willing to make to somebody who is so important to the short term and long term of this future, that's not in question either. So my sense is the Cavs want it to get done. The Cavs are hopeful that it's going to get done. And Evan wants to get it done as well. And it's just a matter of working through all the stuff that the agent has to work through with the front office. But Evan was there for the second Cavs Summer League game against the Milwaukee Bucks. He was sitting courtside. He was next to Darius Garland, next to Jerome. His brother Isaiah was with him as well. When Zaire Smith put the entire Milwaukee Bucks organization on a poster on that dunk, which was absolutely incredible. For the next 5 to 10 minutes, Evan kept standing up during stoppages and kind of imitating everything that Zaire did on that play leading up to the dunk. So he was fully engaged. And at one moment, while Evan was sitting courtside, Kenny Atkinson walked over from the seat where he was previously, sat down next to Evan. They were talking about the game itself. It seemed like they were talking about other things related to basketball and related to life. They were laughing. They were smiling together. Everybody is talking about just how important Evan is this coming season to the Cavs and into the future. And Kenny Atkinson is just raving about the possibilities that this offense can have, the usage that Evan can have within the offense, and the role that he's going to have in the success of this organization. So I just think it's one of those things that it's a matter of time. There is no date coming up in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where there's a deadline that's going to urge either side to actually agree to this thing. There's enough time to work through everything that they need to work through. And I was told that if it does get done, it's probably not going to happen during Summer League. It's probably going to happen after Summer League. In fact, before I left for Summer League, I had a source say, I don't think you're going to have to worry about doing any kind of Evan Mobley story while you're in Vegas. So none of that changes anything of Evan, his desire to get it done, and the Cavs' desire to get it done. It's just there is no deadline that is sparking a level of urgency at this point.
And you mentioned Isaiah Mobley, and we had talked about it on this podcast before, that you believe that there is nothing from that point of view holding Evan Mobley back from signing, obviously, because Isaiah Mobley was not extended a qualifying offer, so he's going to test his waters in the free agent market and see what he can get as a future NBA G League player for another organization.
And if you want to understand just how ingrained the Mobley family is when it comes to the Cavs, Mrs. Mobley was also sitting courtside. She was a few seats over from Evan and Isaiah, and she was sitting with members of the Cavs front office.
Locked in for sure. Oh, my goodness. But also talking about contracts and people that we look to see what happens with when it comes to the Cavs organization, Isaac Okoro is probably the biggest name or what if situation for the Cavs right now. He is a restricted free agent, was given the qualifying offer of, I believe it was $11.8 million for his offer and his potential contract with the Cavs. Yet he is not signed, and it seems like he is shopping the market to see what is potentially open and available for Isaac when it comes to more money or a bigger role on a different team. Chris, what have you been hearing from Isaac Okoro's camp or people that you've heard around the league about what Isaac is looking for, but also the situation when it comes to the qualifying and the cap space for all of these teams that are kind of in the mix on the Isaac Okoro price tag?
I think there are only 2 teams right now, Ethan, with projectable salary cap space, maybe even practical salary cap space. Like, sure, other teams can do some things to shed some salary and whatnot to kind of make it fit. But I just don't think Isaac's the kind of player where you start making other moves around your roster to free up salary cap space to go and give him a significant offer sheet as a restricted free agent. He just, there is an appeal to him. There's no doubt about it. He's a really, really good defensive player. Throughout the course of the season, I was wondering if I was going to put him on one of my 2 all defensive teams. That's the kind of impact that he made defensively this year for the Cavs. The players that he can guard, really, really important. If you're talking about a team that is rebuilding, he brings toughness, he brings competitiveness, he brings a fire. Those are things that, teams that haven't done a lot of winning will want in their program. So he fits from that standpoint on a rebuilding team, and for a team that has enough offense, enough spacing, and they're looking to maybe be a play-in team or a playoff team. He's somebody who can guard Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. If you're talking about in the Eastern Conference, flip it over to the Western Conference. Anthony Edwards, he's battled him in the past. Trae Young, whatever the situation may be. So if a team has enough shooting, if a team has enough offense, if a team has enough spacing, I think there's an argument that a quote-unquote contending team could also be attracted to somebody like Isaac and his particular skill set. It feels like, though, to me, that he would probably be better in a rebuilding situation because they have more time for his development. They can wait around for him to see if the offense continues to come around, if there's some untapped potential there offensively, and all the while, him helping set the culture of tenacity, defense, stuff like that. So the only two teams that I look at that appear to have practical salary cap space, Ethan, it's Utah and it's Detroit. And obviously the ties in Detroit are obvious. Luke Walton, Sidney Lowe, JB Bickerstaff as the head coach. And it's a team who I think could benefit from somebody that is defensive minded like Isaac because of the struggles that Detroit has had over the last couple of years defensively. They've been one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And he's not going to single-handedly change that, but he could potentially change the attitude, right? He could potentially change the competitiveness level. He could potentially be an extension of JB Bickerstaff and understanding what JB wants, understanding how JB communicates. He can help with that kind of transition. So from the very beginning, when free agency first started, Ethan, people inside the Cavs organization were wondering, is there any team out there that is going to make an offer for Isaac that is going to make us a little bit uneasy about matching it? And when I had conversations with other people in the Cavs organization or other organizations around the NBA or scouts or agents, they all pointed to the Pistons as the one that the Cavs should be most worried about. And until like a majority of their salary cap is taken up, or until they make a decision as an organization that, we're probably not going to spend all that much more in terms of free agency and reconfiguring this roster, I think the Pistons are always going to loom out there. And I think the other variable involved is that there could be a team that doesn't have the kind of contract situations on their roster and the salary cap space to afford him and just bring him as a restricted free agent. In that case, I think there are some tax teams or teams close to the tax that would be interested in somebody like Isaac in a sign and trade. And I think the Cavs would certainly consider that, depending on the assets that they get back in return and depending on how they feel that enhances their roster and improves their chances. So to me, if we're looking at the possibilities when it comes to Isaac, I would say, returning on the qualifying offer is certainly near the top of that possibility list. The Cavs giving him something around what the mid-level exception is valued at, which is about $13 million. I don't think they want to go that high, but maybe if they can get him for something like $10 million annually, I think that's something that the Cavs would potentially be open to. I don't know that Isaac would be open to that. He has a new agent. That's a variable that has to be talked about in this whole conversation as well. And I think a sign and trade with a team like Brooklyn, they have a bunch of wings, bring a little bit more size than Isaac, maybe a little bit more offense than Isaac. Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, those types of players. Maybe the Cavs use Isaac as a centerpiece type sign and trade option to enhance the roster that kind of way. So I think there are a bunch of different options that the Cavs are exploring that other teams around the NBA are looking at when it comes to Isaac. But I don't sense that any kind of resolution is imminent at this point. I think it's just something that the Cavs have to wait on. I think it's something that the NBA, other teams around the NBA are willing to wait on. And it's a hard situation for the Cavs, Ethan, because they understand their financial situation. They almost cannot bring back Isaac and use the mid-level exception and stay under the apron.
And it's such an interesting situation, right? Because we talk about the Pistons being like probably the number one option for Isaac
Mm-hmm.
Okoro when it comes to this situation. And they've signed a good amount of players this offseason
Right.
that could potentially make an impact on their team, could potentially fill a role that Isaac could do. Also, that tucks into the money that we're talking about that Isaac Okoro would want.
Mm-hmm.
Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley. Those guys
Right.
weren't cheap, right? Those
Right.
guys are guys that want to be paid the same amount, if not more, than what Isaac
Mm-hmm.
Okoro is asking for in his current state. Then you turn around and you talked about the Brooklyn Nets and the situation where the sign and trades is probably the more plausible for the Cavs, where they feel like they get something back in the return while still being able to export Isaac Okoro to another team like Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith. Dorian Finney-Smith is a guy that you specifically, and I'm going to give you your props, have been talking about all season long in the trade category for the Cavs, and somebody that the Cavs have been looking at, talking about, liking, and things of that nature. So it's very interesting to see the situation. It's not clear cut, right? And like you said, Chris, the decision is not imminent. The decision does not feel like it's coming in the next couple weeks or whatever. It feels like this is going to be a very thought out process that the Cavs need to do, right? And especially with how much we saw Donovan Mitchell wait that trade, that situation happen. Is obviously this is not a blockbuster trade situation that is going to happen this season. But the amount of time, the amount of thought, the amount of process that's going to happen feels like it might linger towards the end of the of off season. Also, because you think about the qualifying offers on the table for Isaac.
Right.
If he wanted to sign the offer, he would have signed the offer. The situation would have been over. He would have been still on the Cavs in that thing.
Well, I think the other thing is, so if you're somebody like Isaac, you know that the qualifying offer is out there. So you know that is a fallback for you. And if that's the direction that you have to go, if you have to take the qualifying offer and play 1 year on the qualifying offer and then become an unrestricted free agent next off season, where maybe there's a little bit more money available, there are more appealing teams with that cap space, and there just aren't the restrictions of, there's a reason why it's called restricted free agency. It benefits the team greatly. And the Cavs have shown that they're willing to use restricted free agency to their advantage. And they should, because this is a business. This isn't a charity. And that doesn't mean that the Cavs don't like Isaac. They do like Isaac. They invested in Isaac. They've developed him. There are certain ways where he can help this team. There's no doubt about it. If you start talking about the Cavs without an on-ball defender like Isaac, without a point of attack defender like Isaac, you start getting a little bit more concerned about their defense, right? Especially out there on the perimeter. You feel relatively okay about it because you still have Jared Allen, you still have Evan Mobley back there erasing mistakes and protecting the paint. But obviously their point of attack defense is going to suffer if Isaac's not on this team, and you just don't have a viable replacement to start doing those kinds of Isaac Okoro defensive type things, just waiting there. You know what I mean? I guess some of that role would probably go to Donovan. I think some of that role would probably go to Karras, right? They would just have to pick up more of that defensive responsibility. Same thing when it comes to Max Strus, Dean Wade, if he can stay healthy. But guys to the level of Isaac, Karras isn't the same kind of defender. Donovan's not the same kind of defender. So the Cavs understand that he has value to them. But they've gotten to a point, Ethan, where they have to attach a financial number to that. And that becomes complicated because for all of those positive things that would make them want to have him back, there are clear-cut deficiencies with him on the offensive end of the floor. And there are clear-cut deficiencies that come with the team as an offensive unit because of Isaac. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast a number of times. He took one three-pointer of about 40 during the playoffs that was contested or tightly contested. Even though he shot a really good percentage during the regular season, even though he has changed his ability to knock down the three-point shot since he came into the NBA, teams still don't respect him on the offensive end of the floor. They just ignore him. They sag away from him. it congests the court for everybody else. That extra defender is bothering Donovan. That extra defender is bothering Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, Darius Garland, Karis LeVert, whoever is on the court at that point in time. You know what I mean? So it just, if he's not going to be a high minute player in a playoff environment, because every single year that they have been to the playoffs with Isaac, he has lost playing time. He's been pulled out of the rotation, or he's been pushed further down the rotation. So it's like, if you understand that's how you view him in a playoff environment, and success for this team is now being defined by playoffs, and he's only going to get 15 to 18 minutes a night in the playoffs, depending on the matchup too. It's probably matchup specific. You're going to give that guy $15 million a year? You're going to give him $18 million a year? No. You're going to bid against yourself? No, it's not going to happen. So because they understand his limitations, and because they understand the market and the advantages that they have when it comes to restricted free agency, the Cavs aren't just jumping at this opportunity to overpay Isaac. They're going to let this thing play out, and they're going to see what the market dictates his value, because they're having a hard time internally figuring out what the right value is for him. And it just seems like their value of Isaac from a financial standpoint is not on the same level of what Isaac's new agents believe it to be. So I think you do have a bit of a staring contest here. And I think when you have that situation, it usually ends either with a sign and trade, or that particular player playing on the qualifying offer and just seeing if he can cash in next offseason.
And I'm really glad you put it that way, Chris, because like, this is not a situation where the Cavs don't understand the value of Isaac Okoro, especially as a defender, especially as an athletic player in transition and those things. It's about the playoffs. It's about that intricacy. It's about the championship contention that they want to have coming up in the next couple of seasons. And if Isaac is going to be a key piece, or if he's going to hinder what they're doing in that 16-game process, right? We've talked about it, Chris, at an abundance. There's 82-game players, and there's 16-game players. Right now, it seems like Isaac Okoro is an 82-game player. And although he is the best perimeter defender, best point of attack defender that the Cavs have, are the Cavs willing? This is the conversation it seems like they're having. Are the Cavs willing to trade that for the potential of somebody else that is able to bring more of an offensive mindset and be able to contribute on that end of the floor while still having slightly of a good defensive presence, right? So, and I wrote about this for cleveland.com earlier this week, and I'm going to have more stuff on Isaac coming out this week on more of the cap space situation, more of what teams could be informed, which guys could be traded. But right now, I want to talk about Dorian Finney-Smith. Finney-Smith, because we've talked about that for a minute now, right? And Isaac Okoro has played in 17 playoff games during his career, starting in 9. He averages 38.7% from the field and 27.1% from three-point range. Dorian Finney-Smith averages 44.6% from the floor and 41.7% from beyond the arc in the 35 playoff games he's played in, starting each contest, right? So that's not only somebody that is getting more minutes, getting more opportunities, shooting at a higher volume, but also being able to hold his own on the defensive end, right? Because we look at, obviously, the Brooklyn Nets weren't in the playoffs this past season, so we turn to the regular season numbers. During the regular season, Isaac Okoro had a 110.7 defensive rating, while Dorian Finney-Smith was 113.2. That's not a big drop-off, right? That shows that he can play, and also Dorian Finney-Smith is 2 inches taller than Isaac. So that matchup that Isaac had to fend off Paolo Banchero in the first series against the Orlando Magic, that comes a little bit easier against somebody like Dorian Finney-Smith, because we know Paolo Banchero hit some crazy shots in that series, just being able to drive. And even though Isaac Okoro was playing some spectacular defense, It came down to, okay, I'm just going to fade away and hit it over the top of you because I'm taller than you. That's simply what it came down to. Mm-hmm. And that's why Dean Wade is so integral when it comes to the defense and him being able to guard players like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Paolo Banchero, those type of things. But you also look at what is going on with Isaac Okoro during the regular season and how that could translate, because that is what the conversation is now. Could that still translate? He's young. Is he going to be able to grow into the player that he could, that the Cavs saw potential in when they drafted him so high? Mm-hmm. And right now, it feels like Isaac thinks his bang is higher than the buck that the Cavs are willing to give him, if that makes sense. So I think it's really interesting to think about what everything is going on with Isaac. And like we have been saying, it is not because Isaac doesn't have value to this Cavs team. He does. But the money is where it gets tight. The cap space, the aprons, the nerdy stuff that we have been talking about on this podcast for weeks now is what makes it difficult. Because if Isaac Okoro wants $15 million a year or whatever whatever he wants based on that situation, Dorian Finney-Smith is making nearly that amount at 31 years old, right? And you would have to figure out, is he going to be able to have a player option while you can still test him out this next season if the Cavs decide to go through a sign-in trade? Or do you keep Isaac and see if he stays on the qualifying offer and still hinders the team during the playoffs? That's the conversations we're having. But I want to move away from the Isaac Okoro conversation, because I also know that there was some kind of new information that we had not been seeing recently when it came to the Cavs that happened in Summer League, and that's Ty Jerome's back? Question mark? Like, Ty Jerome, who played in 2 games in the entire NBA season, was basically dealing with an ankle injury the entire year, trying to figure out how he was going to come back, playing on a boot and taking stationary shots at practice.
It was a tough year for Ty. I talked to him briefly when we were out there in Vegas for Summer League, and I just asked him, hey, how's the ankle? And he said, it's good. It feels healthy. It feels strong again. So it does feel like the issues that he was having, all of the different setbacks, it does feel like he has crossed that hurdle, and the Cavs and Ty together figured out, okay, what was the issue with the ankle? How do we remedy it? And now he's back on the path of, all right, let's work our way back. Let's get back into game shape. Let's continue to enhance different facets of our game.
And that's great progress for Ty Jerome, right? After a season that has been very trying. I feel like a lot of the different point guards and a lot of the different guards were going through something this past season. Darius Garland, obviously, the other main one with that situation. Craig Porter Jr., when the playoffs came around, injuring his ankle in the final game of the regular season. Like, that is a tough situation for guys to be put in, especially when you talk about the load that Donovan Mitchell was dealing with throughout the regular season and all of that. That took a toll on him, and him not being able to play for the final couple of games when they were in Boston. And who knows if Donovan Mitchell plays. But anyway, I feel like this is a great time. And Chris, it's been weird, dude, because I've had to do 2 episodes of Hey Chris Pod without Chris being on the podcast. I was like, what? Where's Chris? But so we got a couple of questions. What do you say?
Hey, Ethan. That's fine.
Nah. Hey, man. I'm not stealing your thunder. It's Hey, Chris. I don't got the insider. And like Jimmy says, I don't know stuff like Chris knows. But a couple of questions from our subtexters for you today, Chris, based on the situations going on. And the first one that I found interesting was from our guy, Scott, in Greensboro, North Carolina. He said, can the Cavs compete with the Celtics, Knicks, 76ers without a legit 3? Can they get a Cam Johnson with a LeVert Okoro second-round pick package, or is Dorian Finney-Smith more realistic? Feel free to add any more targets the front office may be looking at. Obviously, we talked about the Dorian Finney-Smith situation, but Chris, Go into a little bit about what Cam Johnson would bring, what you think it would take for him to be added, and which one you think is more realistic. And I think, to me, it feels like Dorian Finney-Smith because it feels like more of a complete swap for both teams.
So, Ethan, I hate to dismiss this, but like, I think Max is fine as a small forward. I think he's a starting caliber small forward in today's NBA. Would it be better if he was 2 inches taller? Sure. Are there different lineup variations that they can use when Max is at the 2 and maybe he is a little bit more comfortable and maybe the Cavs can put a little bit more length and size out there on the perimeter? Yeah. But of like all the things that happened to the Cavs this past season that prevented them from advancing beyond the Eastern Conference semifinals, I never looked at it saying, well, they just weren't good enough at the small forward spot. They weren't getting enough productivity from the small forward spot. I thought Max lived up to his contract that the Cavs gave him, and he could have shot better. Max would be the first one to tell you that. But he brought a whole bunch of spacing, a whole bunch of gravity, a whole bunch of movement to the offense. And he was a winning, positive player for them at both ends of the floor. So I just never looked at this team and said, if they have Max Strus as the starting small forward, there's just no chance that they compete. You know what I mean? I think the questions that I had ran a little bit deeper than that. Now, look, could they get an upgrade at the small forward spot? Of course, theoretically. Of course, theoretically, because that is a very, very difficult position. That is a deep position. That demands a lot. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that, well, Max Strus is the locked-in starting small forward and the Cavs shouldn't ever look at the possibility of a Brandon Ingram or a Kevin Durant trade or Paul George before he went to Philadelphia. Like, I'm not going to just dismiss outright some of these other possibilities that they could do at small forward. But if you're the Cavs, I don't think you have to be desperate to improve that particular position, because I think Max is fine enough at that spot. I think they need Darius to play better than what he did this past season. I think they need to figure out the Jared Allen, Evan Mobley thing on the offensive end of the floor and ask themselves, is that a viable pairing? Is there enough spacing? Is there enough shooting? Those are the things that come to mind. Can they upgrade the 7th or 8th guy in the rotation from what they have currently? Those are the things that stand out to me. In saying all of that, Ethan, if there's an opportunity for the Cavs to go out and acquire Dorian Finney-Smith, and it doesn't cost them too much, and they don't have to give up like all of the remaining assets, basically, all of the remaining tradable assets that they have, basically, then they should absolutely explore that. Cam Johnson has been on my radar for years. He's been on the Cavs' radar for years. They brought him in for a pre-draft workout. They fell in love with him in 2019. The love that they have for Cam hasn't changed. It hasn't wavered. They were planning to use one of their first-round picks that year to get Cam Johnson until he vaulted into the lottery. And, he's somebody who can space the floor. He's somebody who can knock down shots. You worry about the injuries. You worry about the availability. You worry about the fact that he does basically nothing else to contribute to basketball except for shoot, knock down those threes, space the floor, and score a little bit. Like, he's not going to dribble all that much. He's not going to pass. He's not going to get a bunch of assists. He's certainly not going to rebound at his position. He's not going to do a whole lot on the defensive end of the floor, but he does bring a skill set that would certainly benefit the Cavs. And I think he would probably be better on a team like Cleveland that is a legitimate contender as opposed to Brooklyn that who knows where the Nets are going. So if the Cavs can explore that possibility and not have to give up too much of their depth, not have to give up too much in terms of their draft capital. I mean, I've sat here for the last couple of weeks, Ethan, and I've wondered, okay, Isaac Okoro as the centerpiece and something else to make the salaries plus 3 second-round picks into the future. Is that enough for Cam Johnson? I don't know. I don't know how Brooklyn sees him. I don't know how Brooklyn values him. I do know that he was part of the Kevin Durant trade, and they were really, really excited about his inclusion in that Kevin Durant trade. Has that changed? Are they in a different position? Do they regret the contract that they gave him? I don't know those things. It's hard to gauge exactly what Brooklyn wants to do and where they want to go and how they view themselves. But I've said this from the very beginning. If Cam Johnson is available, the Cavs will 100% be involved in those conversations because they know the kind of player he is and they know what kind of player he can be for this team. And he also has the ability to play the 3/4 spot as opposed to the 2/3. And we've talked about this too, Ethan. The Cavs have so many different guys, it feels like. They have more guys that can consistently play the 2-3 and be productive there. And if they're going to enhance this roster, it's more the 3/4 position. And Cam and Dorian Finney-Smith, they both fit into that bucket more so than Isaac Okoro does, more so than Karis LeVert does.
And it's interesting because you talked about the kind of aspects of Cam Johnson's game that are profitable, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the shooting aspect of it, right? A
Right.
6'9" shooter who could potentially on a Cavs team be labeled more so as a specialist rather
Right.
than somebody that has to contribute on both sides of the ball, like Dorian Finney-Smith. And Dorian
Mm-hmm.
Finney-Smith was also in the Kyrie Irving trade. So we know that the Brooklyn Nets hold both of those guys to high regard because they're like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, both two guys that potentially could be in the Hall of Fame. We traded for you guys to get rid of them. So it's definitely going to be an interesting scenario when it comes to what the Cavs end up doing with Isaac Okoro and who they could put into different holes to figure out how to make those things connect, especially with the situation with Kenny Atkinson
Yeah.
having relationships with some of the guys, especially Karis LeVert, who I know could be in those trade conversations, and sending him potentially back to Brooklyn.
The other thing that I want to point out is um, the Cavs understand that there is a weak point on this roster, and they've used a bunch of different resources to try and address that. Right? They drafted Isaac Okoro 5th overall in 2020. They spent in free agency on Max Strus. So all I'm saying is, sure. I mean, like, could that position get better? Yes, I think we can all admit that. But this idea that there is somebody out there that is realistically attainable for the Cavs, that is a significant upgrade over Max Strus, I just don't buy it. I just don't see that guy out there. So sometimes you just have to invest in the market that's available to you, right? Sometimes you have to explore the trade options that that are out there in the market. And then you have to determine, okay, is the cost of what we would be giving up worth it because it's going to be an upgrade, right? And I just don't see a whole bunch of guys out there that I would sit there and say, well, that guy should displace Max Strus in the starting lineup, or that guy is out there that the Cavs can realistically attain that's going to be a better matchup against Jason Tatum and Jalen. It's Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. Like we're talking about top 25 players in the NBA. In Jason Tatum's case, probably top 8 player in the league. Jalen Brown probably closer to 25 than he is to 10. But like, who are they going to get that's going to put them on the level with Boston all of a sudden? You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't have the free agency money just to throw at Paul George and be like, hey, all right, we got a guy for that particular matchup. We've got a guy who can be a potential trump card in that particular series. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, we can sit here and we can have these conversations and say, honestly, well, the Cavs would be better off than they are right now, with somebody instead of Max Strus for that series against Boston. And it's like, how many other teams would say the same thing? You know what I mean? And it's like, sometimes you just don't have Um, you just don't have the right options to go out and improve as drastically as maybe the fans would want a team to in the offseason. The 76ers had the means, they had the resources, and they had the attractiveness to lure Paul George. The Cavs were not in the same situation. They couldn't just give him that kind of money in free agency, right? You can sit here and you can talk about Brandon Ingram all you want to, but understand the cost of getting him is going to be pretty high. And then it's giving up a whole bunch of assets to turn around and give him $50 million a year. Like, that's the conversation. So I just don't see that guy out there that is a clear-cut upgrade on Max Strus that the Cavs have just like snubbed their nose at and said, nah, we're not possibly going to be in those conversations because Max is just that damn good.
The other thing, the last thing on this one is, I mean, Max Strus is a winner. Max Strus is a bulldog. Max Strus is somebody that impacts winning. Like, he does everything that the Cavs could ask of a small forward who is undersized that has to go up against some of the best small forwards, power forwards, shooting guards in the league. Because we know that the Cavs have thrown Max Strus in the shooting guard, small forward, power forward role different times throughout the season, and even in the playoffs, been like, hey, switch. You got Kristaps. like, dog. So it's a situation where Max Strus doesn't get enough credit because of the lack of shooting that he had this season, and understanding that that's probably an anomaly because Max Strus understands how much he wants to improve on that part of his game and how much he wants to win with this team, how much that Donovan Mitchell had to kind of vouch for him to go and get him last year. But, Chris, all of that aside, I said we were going to get to some fun stuff, and right. I am not going to hold that any longer because, man, we talk about fans wanting to be GMs, fans wanting to run teams and all of this stuff. Well, NCAA 25 finally came out, and I'm trying to figure out how quickly you're jumping on this game and how fast you're going to go cop it from the nearest GameStop because, my goodness, how many years have we waited for this game? 11 or so? Like, it feels like it's about time. Well overdue.
This was one of, oh my God. I had so many nights in college, so many nights in high school where I would just be up slinging it with Colt Brennan of Hawaii. I mean, I was setting records with Colt Brennan in Hawaii, or I was using whoever I wanted to use, Notre Dame or something like that, or Ohio State. And me and my buddy, my roommate in college, so many hours spent playing this game, this franchise. And it is so good. It is so much fun. So if there is a game that is going to bring me back my dirty little secret or something like that, it would be this one. Because I have thought about this for the last, couple of weeks. I've thought to myself, should I? And do I have enough time as a dad to even try and justify it in my own head of 2 hours a night or, bypassing that extra sleep that I probably need as a dad to stay up for a couple of hours and play 2 games in a season and try and compete for a national championship. One of my favorite games growing up. I want to know from you, like, who is the team that you're going to use first? Because that's really, really important.
Okay, so first and foremost, I mean, I love sports games, right? I was brought up on them. Like, this is what I have been waiting for years. I didn't play the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, none of those games. I wasn't that kind of guy. I was the MLB The Show, the Maddens, the EA Sports, all of those games. I even had NHL back in the day, back when I had an Xbox. Yeah. My goodness. So, I mean, this is like a big thing for me. Obviously,
It's a
I'm
big thing for the
five.
world. Are you kidding me? The world has been waiting for this. Yes.
Sorry, I had to make it a me moment for a second. But um, I mean, my team that I will use. Also, first of all, this game I've just been watching clips because I haven't gotten it yet, and I'm trying to wait for the price to drop a little bit because that bad boy is expensive. But
Yeah.
um, I've been seeing like the different gameplays. I've been seeing all of the different teams and all of the different stadiums and environments. I watched somebody come out and play in Penn State during a whiteout, and the receiver joints were going like this, just like not even being visible at a point. I was like, oh my goodness. But if I had to pick a team, man, I'm really. I mean, I'm gonna piss some people off with this one, but I'm between Texas and Colorado because obviously Colorado you get to play with Travis Hunter on both ends of the
Mhm.
both ends of the field, defense and offense. I mean, I saw Shador and Travis playing against each other, both being Colorado, and Shador using Travis to intercept Shador and to take it back to the crib to win the
Yeah.
game. That was insane. But both of my parents went to UT Austin,
Okay.
Texas, so I'm gonna see if I can get Arch Manning some records instead of the guy that's on the cover, Colton. But I mean, I really do think that it's between Texas and Colorado for me. Obviously, yes, I'm going to get Ohio some championships. Go OU! Come on, Bobcats! You know how we do. We
Yeah.
gotta
Good luck with
help
that
our
one.
guys out. Yeah, how to get our guys. Slide that in there a little bit, Chris. But I mean, this is just like monumental, right? Because you think of the guys that are getting paid for stuff like this, the NIL
Yeah.
deals, how people are gonna grow. I mean, there's a guy on South Carolina. I was looking at some of the stats for some of the players. He's a cheat code. Dude is like
Mm.
6'5", got a 99 acceleration, 99 speed, and he's a wide receiver. I'm like, if you play with South Carolina, it's like you played with the Dodgers in MLB The Show. Like you cheating.
Okay, so I have a question because way back in the day, the first thing that I did when I bought the college football game is I would buy one of those magazines with every single roster, whether it was Phil Steele or Street and Smiths, with every single roster, and then I would go through and I would name all the guys, right? Because part of the reason why I was playing the college football game is because I also had Madden and I wanted to boost those guys to put them in the draft of Madden. But I didn't want to draft like quarterback 15 from Hawaii. I wanted my guy Gunsling and Cole Brennan, right? So the one of the first things that I did was I would go in there and I would name everybody. It would be so tedious. It took so long to do that. But I felt there was a benefit rather than wide receiver number 4 or running back number 2. It would be a guy, his name, and it was actually the player. So this edition, because of all of the NIL things and because of naming rights stuff that has changed in college football, do these guys come named now, or do they are
They
named?
got names on the back of the jerseys. They got
Really?
yeah. And
Oh,
Chris, what I heard was
oh,
I don't know where I heard this. I think it
it's
might have
game
been on
change.
Tiki Taki. It might have been on the Tiki Taki. But
Okay.
I heard that you can create your own player and then transfer that player into Madden. Like you can like
Ooh,
save the file and then transfer it to Madden. And I was
yeah.
like, I might need to get this
Oh, you
game
don't
to.
do that. Tell me you don't do that. You don't put Ethan Sands at cornerback or something like that. Don't
That
do
corner's insane. No, I like creating my own player, but I'm saying like a road to the show type. Not like you make him
that.
a 99 or anything. No. Like a road to the show. Like because they're
Yeah.
in the new EA Sports 25. They got you can pick your rating. You can be a 5-star, you can be a 4-star, a 3-star, or you can be an underdog and like
Yeah.
have to walk on to the team. And
Oh, okay.
obviously I've heard about like the different ratings that you get depending on what you choose, and like
Yeah.
the underdog, you get like a 60 overall, and you have to come in to like if you pick like Alabama, you are not
Yeah.
getting no minutes. I heard people that took like 2 years to get playing time. They were like the fourth string or whatever, and had to wait until the starter got out of there. Said, "All right, he got drafted. Can I get some minutes, coach?" Like,
Yeah.
and there's like obvious, and there's also like decisions that you can make. Like they're like you can win a game, and some girl will hit your phone and be like, "Hey, we finna have a party. You should come to," and
Yes.
like it'll like
Yes.
drop your GPA
Yes.
down and stuff. And I'm like, dog, like I've literally seen people choose to do something rather than do something else, and their GPA is dropped so low that they were now ineligible to play.
Love that.
Like they had to go to class.
Love that. Love it. If it's worth it, do it.
Oh my god.
In the game. In the game. I'm not talking about in real life for all the college kids that are listening. I'm talking about in the game. That would spice it up. The way that you described it too, it's like a real life Rudy experience. Coming in as a walk-on, undersized, not getting any playing time, have to wait your turn a couple of years. Like that's fun. Back in the day when I used to create myself, I would boost those sliders. I would make myself a star wide receiver or a star cornerback or something like that. But that was back in the day when I was in high school and college, and it made sense to actually put myself in a college football video game or in a Madden game. Now I'm a dad with a dad bod and a son. I'm not going to make myself into a college football player again. You know what I mean? Maybe you don't have as much seasoning. Let's put it that way. You're more fresh.
I'm gonna take that not as disrespect. I'm not gonna take that as disrespect. I don't have enough seasoning to be able to put myself in the game. You know what, Chris? Hey man, I'm graduated 3 years now. I'm getting up there. I'm getting old. you definitely got a better physique than me. I'm trying to figure out this walking stuff that you got going on. Trying to lose 10 pounds or whatever it is by the summertime. I mean, good Lord. This is like, these are the conversations. Like, this is like one of the best games that I've seen in a long time, and I haven't even got my hands on it yet. Like, I want, like, I've been watching people play and all of these different things. And I'm like, all right, well, how do I do this, this, and this? How do I maximize everything?
What's it like nowadays? See, this is how far removed I am. It used to go in line early in the morning at GameStop or like that for the release of Madden, for the release of college football, and you could just physically go in the store and try and wait in line, beat the crowd, and buy one of the 15 copies or whatever it was that was released on that day. Is it the same thing nowadays? Is it the same kind of setup? Is it the same kind of demand? Is it hard to get your hands on a copy when one of these new games drops immediately, or do they have so much supply that it's not a big deal anymore?
For other games, it's definitely harder to get your hands on like new editions unless you're pre-ordering and stuff like that. But like with the NIL stuff, players that are in the game got their first hands on the copy and stuff like that. NFL players that have been like Lamar Jackson took to Twitter and was like, I need this game before everybody else gets it. I don't know why there's a competition to get these things. When I'm in the NFL, I was a Heisman. I need this game. I've been waiting for this game. Like, I feel like with this specific game, because it was so widely like everybody wants it, they definitely probably made more copies than usual. But
it still is
I would not be surprised if I try to pull up to a GameStop in the next couple of weeks and they're like, lifestyle. Sorry, bud. We're out. All right, Chris. Well, we talked about NCAA, obviously. We talked about all things Cavs and all the important things that we had to do our jobs.
I don't mean this disrespectfully at all.
With all that being said, that'll wrap up
other things. Because a podcast is just life. Yes, it's the primary focus of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast is going to continue to be basketball. It's going to continue to be the Cavs. But Ethan and I are people. We're going to talk about life things. We're going to talk about food. We're going to talk about video games, obviously. We're going to talk about some of the things that we do outside of here. We're going to talk about life on the road. We're going to talk about our families. We're going to talk about things that appeal to us as well. So it's not just going to be 45 minutes or 50 minutes of only basketball, and we're not going to branch out of other things. You know, one of the first things that I was taught 20 years ago when I first started in radio is that stories sell. Stories about yourself, stories that are relatable to other people that are listening. That's what sports talk radio is. It's all contained within the fact that the main driver of the program is going to be sports talk. But you're going to talk about guy stuff. You're going to talk about relatable things to other people that are listening, because not everybody wants to hear about crossing patterns or cover 2 or cover 3 or something like that. You know what I mean? If you're talking about the Browns or if you're talking about football.
Right. And I mean, like, that is what makes this a Cavs community, right? This is what makes you want to tune into us talking. We're not just two talking heads, talking sports, talking X's and O's. And that's why Kenny Atkinson is the guy that the Cavs wanted to get. He is a player development guy. He wants to be in the mix with them, right? We're in the mix with these guys. We talk to them. Chris travels all the time to get these conversations, to get these stories, to tell you guys. And we're sharing them with you. And we also want to share the journey with you.
Yeah.
Because as I've learned, it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? But with all that being and being relatable. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris and me by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me and Chris. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.